Welcome to a new edition of Political Adda with ThePrint. Leader of opposition Rahul Gandhi is in the United States and he's made a bunch of very controversial comments. They have been very polarizing here in India. He's made comments about Sikhs, about reservation in India, about whether it should end or not. We'll talk more in detail about these statements. We'll flesh them out. Joining us at ThePrint today is author and columnist Kapil Komireddi. Kapil, welcome to ThePrint. And I also have in the print studio with me my colleague Sourav Barman, who covers the Congress for us. Kapil, just to jump straight into the statements that Rahul has made in the US, you have obviously come out, reacted very sharply to some of his comments. Tell us, why do you think his statements, especially on Sikhs, the status of Sikhs in India, because for the benefit of our viewers, Rahul said that this politics is not about, it is not a political issue. The fight in India is not just about politics. It's about whether Sikhs can wear a turban and a kada in India. Do you, Kapil, think that this statement is irresponsible? Because that's what we gathered from your tweets. Can you elaborate what you feel about this statement?
Right. I first learned about what Rahul Gandhi said, what Rahul Gandhi did, through an American diplomat, a mid-level diplomat of my acquaintance, who has lobbied rather vigorously India by persuading their colleagues that many of the people so many champions of Khalistan who operate in North American soil are not kind-hearted activists. They're actually ethno-religious nationalists, more akin to the champions of the Confederacy in America itself. And this person called me up and was quite agitated and said, to use his words, he said, Rahul Gandhi is a disgrace. And I then looked into what he said. And I was frankly appalled. I don't necessarily subscribe to the idea that when you're on foreign soil, you mustn't criticize leaders at home. Each politician makes his or her own opinion, takes their own opinion on this particular question, but I'm not particularly troubled by a politician speaking to a foreign audience or an audience abroad, which is largely composed of Indians anyway, where he lays out what his perspective of what is happening in India. All of that is apparent to anyone who reads newspapers, and it's perfectly legitimate for a politician to do that. Where I was struck by is the way he ended up amplifying, effectively speaking from the hymn sheet, singing from the hymn sheet, speaking from the script of the people, the men who are designated terrorists in India, by claiming that Sikhs face an existential crisis in India, that they cannot wear in public the sacred symbols of their faith. It is so outrageous. It is frankly offensive to Sikhs. I spoke to several. I urge you, please, to speak to Sikhs and your Sikh colleagues and invite onto your show Sikhs. Many Sikhs I spoke to were appalled by what he said. Are Sikhs unable to wear symbols of their faith? Where is this man living? And I frankly started wondering if he's sane, if his mind is healthy. This was offensive. This was frankly staggering on so many levels. I just couldn't believe that someone would say that. And once he put the statement out there, one of the men designated terrorists, he put out a statement purporting Rahul Gandhi as a hero, a champion of the cause of Khalistan. And that's fitting, really. And that is what he did. That is what he went to America, and that is what he did. It's despicable.
But it's
despicable because it is offensive and gratuitously offensive and insulting to two generations of Sikhs who stood up to the Khalistanis and stood by their country.
Right. Before Sourav joins the conversation, very quickly, Kapil, your tweets were not obviously just about his comment on Sikhism. You made comments about Rahul Gandhi in general being what you said was a quote unquote disgrace to Indian politics. many people in India argue that, especially in the last few months, last couple of years, maybe with the Bharat Jodo Yatra, Rahul Gandhi has reinvented himself, has reinvented his politics, and the results of that showed in the Lok Sabha elections as well. But you have a different stand on this. So do you think Rahul Gandhi has in any fundamental or significant way reinvented his politics?
No, it's one of the greatest fictions. This is the truth. He led his party to a third consecutive defeat. He's 54 years old. He entered politics when he was in his 30s or late 20s. It took Siddhartha Gautama less time to achieve enlightenment than it has taken Rahul Gandhi to mature as a politician. Right? Nations were built and fell apart in the medieval era in the time it has taken Rahul Gandhi to mature as a politician. And his great achievement has been to lead his party to a third successive defeat. That is not a victory by any stretch of the imagination. Narendra Modi is still the Prime Minister of India, and that is because the opposition is led by this incompetent group.
Kapil, if I bring you back to Rahul's statements, other than his statement on Sikhs facing an existential threat in India, he also spoke on reservations. He had a line that, we will think of scrapping reservations when India is a fair place, but right now India is not a fair place. So now the BJP has also made an issue out of that statement. But do you think his statement on reservations has been distorted? Is it fair on the BJP's part to criticize him on that count?
No, he's often right about many things. I agree with him more than I disagree with him on many of the things. His politics and my politics are probably not that different. My trouble with him is that he hurts the message by being the messenger. If anyone else were the message would be more prudent. He allows his message to become distorted by combining that message. He could have just spoken about the reservations, about the condition of Muslims in India, about the condition of members of certain marginalized castes in India. But by bringing up Sikhs, what he has done is he has handed ammunition to the government, which will then use that to distort everything else. He is the worst enemy of his own message.
So the fundamental problem with Rahul Gandhi is the fact that he cannot articulate his thoughts.
The final problem with Rahul Gandhi is that he's an entitled dynast. He shouldn't be in this business. He has been in this for a quarter of a century, and in that he has led Congress from one defeat to another, and he has achieved nothing. And his presence at the pinnacle of power in India's principal opposition party is a demonstration of the complete negation of democracy. It is an affront to anyone who believes in democracy. He should retire from politics, and people who are meritorious should take the position of the leader of the opposition. But he occupies the position he does because quite a few people in the party profit from his presence in that position. Have you guys read Animal Farm by George Orwell? Do you remember it? There's a character in that called Squealer, who was Napoleon's most enthusiastic pig defender. He says, integrity is not that important. Loyalty and obedience are more important. And people around Rahul Gandhi are like Squealer. They will see India destroyed, but they will still stand by him because they owe their careers to his presence in that office.
But the Congress might argue that he is not actually leading the party. The Congress had an election and Mallikarjun Kharge was elected as the president of the party. Now Kharge is leading the party, not Rahul Gandhi.
If Kharge is leading the party, why was Rahul Gandhi in every single meeting? Why was Rahul Gandhi representing the party abroad? What Rahul Gandhi was a backbencher. He had no role. Why was he sitting on the dais with Kharge? And it's an insult to your intelligence, my intelligence, to even entertain that proposition.
One can argue that there are two, I think, possibly interesting things that have come up in Rahul Gandhi's politics over the last few months. And again, these are very polarizing issues. One, his use of Hinduism against Hindutva, which can, of course, be argued as a very trite old formula. But what is your sense of this kind of formulation? And secondly, his use of social justice as a bulwark against Hindutva. Do you think any of these two are working on the ground?
See, I have difficulty. I don't want to spend my time analyzing this man. I think he's not a very smart man. And India deserves something better. Having said that, I will also add that I think he's an incredibly decent human being. I think he is driven by this vague notion that he wants to bring justice and upliftment to people who've been marginalized through centuries of discrimination. I just think he's not the right person to do the job. A lot of people have very noble feelings, noble aspirations. That doesn't mean that they should be entrusted with the power to engineer that transformation of the country, and Rahul Gandhi belongs in that camp. I wish him no ill. I really wish him well, but I just don't want him to occupy the position he does. You'll remember, speaking of caste, you'll remember that when Ahmed Patel was around, someone in the BJP questioned Rahul Gandhi's credentials as a Hindu, and Ahmed Patel said Rahul Gandhi isn't just a Hindu, he's a top drawer Barman. He can demonstrate his commitment to social justice by leaving his job. He's not doing that. On the one hand, he wants to bring about this revolution. He claims he wants to bring about this revolution. On the other, he perpetuates dynastic despotism in India's oldest political party. So his own conduct contradicts what he claims to believe in.
So I have a larger question on the conduct of Indian politicians when they go abroad. A couple of years back, when Prime Minister Modi was in the US, he made a statement that there was a time when people used to feel that what sin they have committed in their past life, that they have taken birth as an Indian. So now, what do Indian politicians, why do they make such statements when they go abroad? What is the kind of validation they are seeking from the audience abroad?
Yeah, that is a very good question. Before I get to that, let me just say about Modi. You said people used to think that they were cursed to be born in India. In the lead up to the general elections, I traveled through 13 states, and in Uttar Pradesh, I met a washerwoman. She said to me that she used to think that Modi was her savior, and she now looks at Modi and thinks he's a punishment for her sins in some past life. Narendra Modi. Nobody in this country's history, very few people can claim to have destroyed as many institutions as the Prime Minister has. And when he goes abroad, he frankly disgraces his office by insulting and denigrating his predecessors, people who occupied the office before him. This is something the Prime Minister should have set the tone. He shouldn't have done this. Now to the question of why Indians do this, why Indian politicians go abroad and do this, I don't necessarily think about that, because India has the world's largest diaspora, and the diaspora has been more and more active in Indian politics, if you are still a citizen of India, that is. They're an influential community, they are a wealthy community, parties want their money, parties want their support, and they've been courting them for years, but now it's done more openly and in a rather lavish way.
I'll quote from that same article. I think you're quoting from your New Yorker piece when you talk about that interaction with that lady you had.
Yeah.
So there's a line in that piece that India's true misfortune is the absence of an opposition capable of directing the deepening disenchantment with the government into a decisive political denouement at the polling booth. And so and you also wrote that the India bloc's prospects appear bleak. So in a way, in hindsight, do you feel you underestimated the strength of the Indian opposition?
No, not at all. I was 2020. India's misfortune, I've maintained this for the last 5 or 6 years. I've written extensively about this, even at your publication. I've said India has had authoritarian leaders before. It has had leaders with authoritarian inclinations before. India's misfortune is that it doesn't have a functioning opposition now. It doesn't. During Modi's second term, I think it was ThePrint that reported it. During Modi's second term, Rahul Gandhi averaged about 5 foreign trips a month. He was never present when he could lead the charge against Modi. And that was India's misfortune. And even now, Modi should be history. Given his record, he should not be in power. The BJP should have been swept out of power. And the fact that the BJP is in power is a testament to the ineffectiveness of the opposition. I did not underestimate the India opposition. The alliance, the India alliance, was incapable. Didn't get its act together, first of all. It was a long time in the making. It didn't have a coherent strategy or a plan. And it was led again by the Congress party. and it didn't succeed in dislodging Narendra Modi. That is the fact. We have the results in front of us. It didn't. The BJP is again in government. The NDA is in government. The BJP leads the NDA. India is an opposition. If they had formed the government, you could have said, yes, I got it wrong. In my piece, I predicted that Modi would not come back to power with a supermajority, because nothing I saw in India suggested that Indians were enthusiastic about him. At the same time, I detected no enthusiasm for the opposition. This is India's tragedy. They do not. An overwhelming majority of Indians have voted against Modi, right? But Congress has not been able to mobilize a plurality of those voters to back it, which would lead to Modi's ouster, but that hasn't happened. And so, no, our great tragedy, our great misfortune is the opposition, especially the Congress party, and most particularly the family leads the Congress party, that owns the Congress party.
Kapil, if one could argue that one of the most fundamental jobs of the opposition is to at least politically be able to exert pressure on the government of the day, then a lot of observers would argue that the India Alliance has, and especially led by the Congress, has in the last few months been able to at least set the agenda politically and in Parliament to a large degree. I mean, one thing that comes on top of my mind is the entire lateral entry U-turn that happened. And if Sourav, you can think of more such instances where the opposition...
The JPC for the Waqf Board.
Correct.
Bill.
Where the opposition has been able to set the agenda. So do you see that as some sort of movement forward in the opposition's politics?
No, the greatest ambition of the opposition should be to form the government. And Congress has been in opposition for 10 years, and it has not been able to come into government. So in that sense, it has failed completely and utterly. Now, in this term, when you say that it is setting the agenda, I'm not entirely convinced. I think the restraining power authority on Modi are his coalition partners, Chandrababu Naidu here and Nitish Kumar in Bihar, and not the opposition. Of course, every opposition party everywhere seeks credit for the government's misfortunes, and there's nothing wrong in that. But I'm not convinced that Rahul Gandhi is the force that Congress's PR minions are making him out to be. I think the real hope for India is that Modi is in a coalition government, and his worst impulses are being restrained by such people as Chandrababu Naidu.
So, Kapil, you hold strong opinion against Rahul Gandhi. The fact is, as a
against him, I have nothing against him personally. I have many common friends. I think he's a very decent human being.
No, as a commentator, you have your disagreements with him, but the fact is, you have been tracking his journey over the last many years. Now, he also occasionally makes these philosophical statements, which he also made during his last trip to the US, where he spoke about the fact that the fundamental idea of Indian politics is the destruction of the self, and in the past he has at the heart of Indian politics is the idea of the destruction of the self, sort of philosophical, and he also add that caveat that he was turning extremely philosophical, and he has made similar remarks in the past also. For example, I'll quote from his 2023 press conference in Haryana during Bharat Jodo Yatra, where he said, Rahul Gandhi is in your mind, I have killed him, wo mar gaya hai, right? A couple of months later, he said, the person that you are seeing in front of you is not Rahul Gandhi, unko maine piche chhod diya hai. So, of course, we cannot read his mind, but what is the image that he's trying to project through these statements?
I have no idea. I'm sorry that I'm mystified by everything you've said. I have no idea. I just find those things you say, I see no depth in them. I see a man who is incapable of communicating his thoughts. You call it philosophical. I call it...
No, I don't call it. He calls it philosophical.
He and his apologists will call it philosophical. I call it the praising of a not very smart man.
Right.
A question that sort of you and I were discussing before we began shooting was a piece that, Kapil, I don't know if you got a chance to read Yogendra Yadav's piece on the somewhat death of political thought.
The sudden death of modern Indian political thought.
Yeah. And we just wanted to sort of know your views on this idea. Is Indian political thought dead? And in that context, what is the role that people in power, people in the opposition can play?
Yeah, I did look at that article, and Yogendra Yadav himself is one of our great political thinkers for whom I have tremendous reverence. I think I have never known Indian politics more debased than currently in Hyderabad. The preoccupation of politicians is to make as much money as they can. I actually happen to know a state health minister, who spends 60 lakh rupees on bespoke health monitoring program. And the government-run hospital in that person's state is really a septic tank. I know this because my father died of cancer last year, and he was being kept alive by a very expensive drug. And he wanted to atone for the fact that he was prolonging his life by taking medicine that was beyond the reach of most people who had cancer in India. So he spent his last weeks and months in this hospital. He died there. And I had to go there. And my father was not a poor person. He had means to support himself, but I thought he was atoning for something. He was a very politically conscious man, and I thought he felt that he had failed he had betrayed his beliefs, so he was going back to that in his final days. And it was shocking. It was really, disturbing. It's not that I wasn't aware of the reality, but to be surrounded by it, to be immersed in it, and to know that there were politicians spending money in this way. And it occurred to me that plundering the state, pillaging the state, corruption, should really be seen as treason. It is really the worst form of treason, because you're stealing resources from your people and you are subjecting them to agony and cruelty and suffering. And this is the reality of Indian politics today. Most people enter politics is open only to dynasts and to hooligans. And people who are meritocratic, people who take, for instance, Shashi Tharoor, the most obvious example, a hugely talented figure, a great votary of Indian secularism, and a good man. He's been thwarted. He's been stamped upon by the squealers in the Congress party, the character squeal of Man on the Farm. And this is what happens. And this is a very terrible period in Indian politics, I think, because of the infusion of capital, because there is so much money sloshing through the system that everyone sees politics as a platform to enrich themselves. And this is really sad. In southern India especially, politics is a very, very, very dirty game in which almost incomprehensible amount of money is involved. And you talk about political thought and political thinkers. I think there are political thinkers when you travel in India. One of the greatest blessings that I count is my ability to travel in India. And you meet ordinary Indians everywhere, and you nowhere in the world are people more rounded, more insightful, and yet their ideas have no platform. So they cannot rise to the top like they used to be able to in the Congress party in the past, or even in the BJP. Modi himself comes from a very humble background. His mother used to clean houses. He's now the Prime Minister of India. That bespeaks the democratic possibilities embedded in India's party political system. That is disappearing very, very rapidly. And that is really tragic.
I know you mentioned Shashi Tharoor, but is there any dominant mainstream political actor who you think, other than Shashi Tharoor, who's also a political thinker? You might have your disagreements with Prime Minister Modi, but would you categorize him as a political thinker in any way?
This is such a good question. Thank you for asking me that, because I have been mulling for some time a long article or a short book on the tragedy of Modi. When Modi came into power, and I've agreed to write something about it. When Modi came into power in 2014, he was a hand grenade hurled by so many people who had been mistreated by the old Indian establishment. And he was, he carried with him the hopes of so many Indians. And he could have really been a transformative agent, an agent of transformation. He said he was going to build smart cities. He was going to clean up the Ganga. He was going to create 20 million jobs. He could have done that. It was not beyond his reach. Instead, what he gave us was demonetization. Instead, what he gave us was a cult of personality unrivaled in the democratic world. Instead, what he gave us were jingles, and he worked more like a copywriter. And he mishandled the greatest humanitarian crisis India faced, which was the pandemic. More people died during the pandemic than in all of the wars that India ever put together. And he fudged the numbers. The press was squeezed. His tenure is a great tragedy because it could have been something different, because he seemed to hint at the presence of some great ideas. And so many people, I never fell for it. I never believed for a moment. I always thought he was a charlatan. But so many good people, I can think of Ashutosh Vashi, I can think of Pratap Bhatt, who fell for it, who thought that Modi might bring about change. But he didn't. And they could have been proven right. And I would be sitting here saying, I was wrong to think that he was a charlatan. He was a changed man. And instead, the last 10 years have been unspeakably wasted years. A generation of Indians, the prospects of a generation of Indians have been destroyed by the Prime Minister.
This has been a very fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for joining us, Kapil. Thank you all for watching the Political Adda. We will be back next week.